Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Our session is going to be around getting started with Horizon desktop and app virtualization. So if you're not familiar, we'll go through the basic concepts. We'll start with some introductions. We'll talk a little bit about how we put the lab together and what the lab consists of. John will give us a little background on Horizon in general and the kind of reason that we have Horizon as a product. And then we'll get into the labs themselves and some Q&A. It's obviously a little more difficult to do questions and stuff here, but please raise your hand and one of us will run out there, and we want it to be as interactive as possible.
Yeah, I'll come over with this mic if you do have a question, so everybody can hear it.
Yeah, and we'll be around at the end too, so this is questions you either don't want to ask in the group or it's just too difficult because it'll interrupt the flow. Feel free to find us afterwards. We're going to be in the hands-on lab for the next few days as well. So with that, John, I'll let you introduce yourself.
All right, so John Kramer, Senior Staff Solution Engineer. Been here 11 years as of this month. Started out in EUC Professional Services, doing EUC delivery, and then moved into a technical account manager role for a little while. And now I am doing what's called the SME team, subject matter expert team. So my job is to kind of help customers if they're having difficulties getting to Horizon deployed, helping them through that and getting you guys to be happy with the product that you bought. Based out of St. Louis, Missouri. And then
thank you.
Over to Nathan.
So I'll keep this pretty brief because if you look at this, we have pretty much the same history at VMware. We actually started on the same team 11 years ago. I also spent a few years as a technical account manager, and I moved into a solution engineer role, slightly different than John's SME role. I look after government customers primarily in California and Nevada, and I'm based in Northern California in Napa. We did just want to give a quick call out to a few people who, without their support, the labs wouldn't have been possible. You'll see some around here, but just quickly by name. Bill, Mark, Vernon, and Colby, they've all played different roles in making this lab come together. And that's actually Bill in the Take a Lab badge there. So if you see him, you can give him poke a little fun at that badge.
He's like right behind us.
Yeah, he'll be right there. So in terms of building out the lab itself, just a little bit around that. When we build these out, we wanted to try and kind of mimic a production environment as much as we could. There's obviously some limitations in a lab, and we'll talk about those and highlight them, where even in this first section, I'm going to demo some stuff because we can't build, huge desktop pools and things like that. But we did build out all of the components, which John will kind of walk us through a little bit, but the Horizon connection server is kind of the brains of Horizon. You don't really have Horizon until you have that. The App Volumes Manager is used to layer on applications. Dynamic Environment Manager is used to layer on user settings and personalizations. So we'll actually cover all three of those in the lab today. A couple of other components that are in there are the Unified Access Gateway, which is generally used for external access. You normally put that in your DMZ. Some customers use them internally as well to funnel the connections to Horizon through a single point. And then this is a little unusual. Workspace ONE Access is kind of a presentation layer. Normally for our customers, that's cloud hosted. Because of the way our labs work, we can't do that. These labs get kind of printed out every time they spin up, so all 50 of you have a unique individual lab. So we use an on-prem version, less common in a customer environment, but what we did here in the lab.
What I really like about the hands-on labs is if you want to not follow the script, you can do that because it is a live environment, so you can just kind of go off script and do whatever you want. Maybe if you want to test something in particular, you can kind of break things and it doesn't matter. At the end, it gets blown away and you just start over.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a really useful tool. Even if you already have Horizon and you're familiar with it, you can skip that process and just play around. You can break the lab, but every time it restarts, you get a brand new lab that's been built out. So to talk a little bit about that construction of the lab, I won't spend too much time here, but it's just kind of interesting background. So when we build these out, we build kind of a template in vCloud Director that has all those components in. For this lab, I think we have in total 6 or 8 virtual ESXi hosts, And then on top of that, we have another 10 or so VMs, including those components we just talked about. Those get pushed into the VMware Learning Platform, and that's what allows you to log in here and take hands-on labs. And as most of you maybe know, these are available after the show as well, and on an ongoing basis. So with that, John, I'll let you kind of run through a little bit of what Horizon is, and a little bit of the reason that we use it.
Yeah, so Horizon is obviously, we first developed it for use in virtual desktops, but then we kind of evolved it into use for RDSH. And the idea here is you're going to have, multiple virtual desktops in the data center, and the idea is to bring it all together so that you don't have to access that stuff remotely, or you're accessing it remotely, but you have to bring it, you're accessing it with a remote protocol, and we call that BLAST. Let me skip down here a little bit, because I like this slide better. So the idea is we have instant clones, we have app volumes, and we have dynamic environment manager. Those are all kind of ancillary pieces of Horizon. Instant clones is what we use to kind of quickly spin up virtual desktops. So we can basically spin up a virtual desktop once every 3 seconds. So if you need to make a change in your environment, you take a snapshot of that virtual desktop. That once you get the gold image all configured the way you want it, you take a snapshot, you tell it to make an instant clone, and it goes off and spins up all these VMs for you. App volumes we use to layer in applications, so you don't have to have as many images out there. So you just basically, you can do apps on demand now with app volumes. So if a user say they want to use 7-zip, and you have that in your catalog, they can click on that and actually get that pulled down to their desktop without it actually being in the base image at any one time. And then dynamic environment managers used to deploy or to keep the track of like the user settings in a non-persistent desktop environment. So if I make a change to like an application setting, dynamic environment manager will record that, and that way the user gets a level of persistence without it actually being a persistent desktop. We also do support full clone desktops, but we try to push customers to using the instant clone technology and things like that to basically reduce the image sprawl and not have the desktops that you have to kind of maintain and back up and things like that. And then of course all that runs on vSphere infrastructure, but we also have it in the cloud. But we have a lot of customers now that are deploying it on vSphere on-prem and using vSAN and NSX to layer in different aspects of security and reliability.
Thanks. So those are the 3 pieces that we're going to focus on today. And more specifically, we're going to start with the instant clones. Think of it like layers, right? Like you need 3 things for the user to be able to log in. You need the operating system. We're going to use Windows 10 in this example, but the same principles apply if you're doing RDSH servers. You can use instant clones for those as well. So we're going to layer down the base image with that. I'm going to walk us through that, and you can follow along if you want. In the actual lab manual, if you take this separately, it's a video. And part of the reason for that infrastructure I explained that's virtualized on virtualized, spinning up lots of these instant clone pools on top of that is really not possible, right, in a nested environment. So I'll walk you through that and kind of explain the choices we're making while we're building out that pool. And then John's going to take us through the application layer. So we're going to take a look at packaging an application, and then how you update that with markers. And then finally, there's a newer feature. It's been out for perhaps a year or so now, Apps on Demand. So the idea behind Apps on Demand is that for RDSH servers in particular, it works on any platform, but with RDSH servers, anyone who's run any kind of remote environments before, whether it be native terminal services, Citrix, or some Horizon, you end up often with silos of different types of server because you've got different groups of users that need those different apps. The idea behind Apps on Demand is that we can decouple that. Normally, we've had app volumes on top of RDSH for a while, but it was always a machine-based assignment. So you had to choose ahead of time, how many servers you were going to have for each type of set of applications. This allows that to be decoupled, so you can have a really generic RDSH farm, and then the applications actually get attached when the user logs in, and if that app that they need is not already there. And then the last bit John talked about, Dynamic Environment Manager, you might hear us call it DEM for short. There's the personalization piece. We can also use that to not only capture, but set different environment variables, and we can do that, again, at login or at app launch, so we'll take a little look at that as well. So with that said, I'm going to jump into a lab here and take a look at instant clone pools. Do you maybe just want to talk through that while I get the lab set up?
Well, actually, yeah, that's
Just the kind of concept of pools.
Yeah, so desktop pools, the idea is with desktop pools is that you're going to have sets of desktop pools for specific sets of users. This was probably more important before we had apps on demand, because you would have to create these desktop pools that were set up for the accounting guys versus the software developers.
Okay.
He's getting there.
I'm getting there.
Yeah.
So hopefully you're already at this point, but if you're not, if you log in, we're going to look for lab 2451-01.
So I guess one thing first before we move on, any questions about anything we've kind of said before or said yet so far? If not, if you do have a question, just raise your hand. I'll come over and we can, I'll use the mic so everybody can hear it.
So I don't know if you were told to start your lab when you began or not, but if you want to follow along, you can start the lab now, and I'll kind of talk you through this first piece, because like I say, the manual is more video-based, and I thought it'd be more interesting to kind of go through it live and take a look. Equally, you're welcome just to follow along. We're going off script. So I'm just going to start by logging into the vSphere web client. So you should have a set of bookmarks in Firefox. And again, you don't need to follow along this piece. Something as a quick side note, all of the modules inside the labs are separate and unique. So you don't have to take the whole set of labs in order. If you want to just take a module on something later on, you can jump straight to that point. So the login here is going to be administrator at vsphere.local, if I can type. And the password is capital VM, WARE, 1, exclamation point. We should probably have that scrawled somewhere big. It is in the lab manual for the other sections. But really just what I wanted to show here, first of all, is the kind of little bit of pre-work we did to get to this point that we're going to be able to create a desktop pool. So we obviously have to base that pool off something. And to do that, we create just a regular 10, 11, RDSH server, whatever you want to do. And we create a base image or gold image. We have a couple here in the lab. A Windows 10 version and an RDS version just above.
Are you guys having audio issues?
Okay, I'm switched on. If it continues, like someone, just raise your hand and let us know, and we can have someone from the audio team check.
We'll switch to this one and see if that helps too.
Is it only mine, or is it both? Me so far? Okay. Yeah, if it happens again, just let us know, and we'll switch to using that.
Yep.
So yeah, this is just a regular VM that you build. We have a tool called the OS optimization tool that you run. We want to make that image as slim as possible, right? So we want to remove any services we don't need, any applications we don't need, and so on. So that tool helps with that. You could do it all manually, and back in the day we used to, but it used to take hours and hours. So this tool has been built to kind of streamline that process.
There's a couple different reasons for that, right? You want to have that image streamlined to keep the resource intensity down on the VMs that you're deploying, because VDI is all about density. So the more you can optimize that OS image, it'll keep you can actually deploy more virtual desktops in your environment. So that's the main reason.
Yeah. So once you've kind of got that prepared, the only other thing you need to do is take a snapshot of it, which we've done obviously in advance here in the lab. So this also applies when you're doing updates. So the snapshot is what we're going to base our pool off. So every time there's a Windows update, for example, the process to get that into the pool is to open up your base image again, power it on, make whatever changes you need. Probably a good practice to run the optimization tool again, because sometimes services get turned back on, or there's going to be another component that's consuming resources you don't want to. Shut it down, take another snapshot, and then when you're ready to update your pool, it's as simple as going into the existing pool and changing the base snapshot that you're running from, and it will then recompose the pool, and you're going to be running on that new version. We won't do that today, but that's the process, which I think, again, probably good to be aware of. So now let's get into the Horizon Administrator itself. If we go into Region A and Horizon Admin A, the login again is Administrator. The password capital V, capital M, WARE 1, bang. So the Horizon Administrator console that we're looking at is running on that connection server we mentioned earlier. So the connection server really is the key for administration, brokering, and also assigning the desktops to users. So under inventory, if we go into desktops, this is where we'll see our pools. Again, if you are following along, we're going to go through all of the options for creating a desktop pool. Don't finish doing that, because you can crash your lab basically by consuming all the available resources. So we'll stop just prior to that. And we'll come back to our instant clone pool that we've already created. So the first choice you get when you're creating a pool is whether you're going to use an automated, a manual, or an RDS pool. Really the preferred method and the way to make Horizon easier to manage is to use the automated pool. We used to have a couple of different flavors of that, but now it's always going to be instant clones for an automated pool. A manual desktop pool can be useful if you have a set of machines that you want to bring into Horizon so that you can present them with the BLAST protocol and through the same clients. A couple of examples there we saw a lot during the pandemic with physical machines. You can put the Horizon agent onto a physical machine and pull that in. So during the pandemic period, there was a lot of idle workstations around the world, right? People put the agent on there, and we're able to essentially make those remote workstations, Horizon workstations, without having to do any image creation. The machines were already configured correctly. Audio gone? Oh, that's good. I apologize, I don't know where that cut out. Maybe we can get some assistance with that if it continues. So yeah, that's one manual desktop use case. The other is, for probably most of you guys, the admins. You often have those special machines, right? They have all the tools the way you want it, the way you like it, physical, virtual, whatever. Throw the agent on there and create yourself a manual desktop pool for that as well. RDS pool's kind of self-explanatory. In larger environments, you'll choose which vCenter you're going to build this in a lab and in a lot of production environments. We just have one. It's really only when you get up to scale, probably beyond, what would you say, a couple of thousand machines, you'd want to start considering multiple vCenters. So when those instant clones are being built and recycled, so every log off basically, we destroy that machine and provision it again. Because we're able to do it so quickly, it means you're getting a totally fresh machine for the end user every time. So you get less of that kind of drift. You know, over time, if you don't reboot a Windows machine for a month, it starts doing strange things, right? Whereas this prevents that. But it does create quite a lot of load for vCenter. Every log in, log out, we're creating new machines. So once you get to that kind of 2,000 range, that's a good time to consider separating vCenters. And then the next piece is whether we're going to have our users assigned in a floating manner, which is to say a true pool, where any user can take any desktop, or in some cases, particularly with software where there's a connection between perhaps a user and a serial number, something like that, we want those users, once they're on there, to always return to that same machine with the same identity, because perhaps there's something on the back end where you're marrying up a username with a machine name, something like that.
A MAC address.
Yeah, or MAC address is the same kind of thing. If you've got software that needs the MAC address to be in line, you need to get that user on the same machine again. So that's the real use case for dedicated. If you're using vSAN, there's some storage optimizations. It builds out the vSAN policies. We're not doing that in the lab either. And then we're just going to provide some basic information about the desktop itself. So we'll give it a name and a display name. And then some details about the provisioning. I'm not going to go through every option. The one that is probably a couple of interest is the naming convention. So here you can add some variables. So for this, I'm just going to have it named HOL with a number afterwards. So the format for that is just a curly bracket, an N, and another curly bracket. So as it provisions machines, it'll just increment the numbers. You then have the option of whether you're going to provision everything up front or whether you're going to do that on demand. On demand can be useful in situations where you don't know the usage for a pool. We see that a lot in education, where you don't know what classes are going to be taken at what time, and you don't have resources to have all of them available all of the time. So with an on-demand pool, it can kind of ebb and flow, but always keep a minimum number available. And then you can just set a full maximum as well. So this is where we get to choosing that image we looked at earlier. So we'll start with selecting the base Win10 machine. We only have one snapshot here because it's a clean machine. Over time, you might see a couple in here because you want to have that option, like I was saying, to update, but also be able to fall back. So that's another plus of this snapshot-based method. You can keep your old snapshot that it's running on, do all your updates, even get as far as putting it in production. You'd probably want to test it first, move it to production. You still have your fallback of the other snapshot. So if you find yourself in a situation where you do need to roll back, again, it's as simple as just switching those snapshots that you're using, and it will recompose the pool to the original one. And then just some basic options for where it sits within vCenter. These are all required, so I'll just click through them. We only have a single cluster in this environment, and consequently only have a single resource pool. Choose a data store. Again, in production, you may spread this over several, especially if you're building larger pools. You might want to spread that out over different storage, depending on what kind of storage you have available. We can change the network if we want at this point in pool creation. So by default, it's just going to be on the same virtual network as the parent machine. But again, to be able to kind of control that image sprawl, we give the option of changing the network at pool configuration time, and the same is true for the compute profile. So you can keep your base image at 2x4, but you can build pools of any combination of CPU and memory from that same base image, and it will take care of it in this instant clone process. And then just some behavioral pieces here around what happens when someone logs off, or rather disconnects but doesn't log off. Do you want to just let that session sit there forever so they can come back to it a day later or 2 days later, or do you want to clean those out every time? Some display options about the protocol we're going to use. I'm not going to dip into those here. And then finally, you just choose where in Active Directory you want to join these machines. So one of the interesting things about the instant clone process, there's two things going on. One is on the vSphere side. We're using something within vSphere called VM fork. That's what allows us to create these really, really quick instant clones. So at a very high level, there's two chunks to that. There's a priming section, normally takes 10 to 15 minutes to get that parent into a state where it can be cloned. But once that is done, we're using VM fork to take these essentially running machines and fork them out, much in the way you do with snapshots. We do something similar for the disk, but we also do that with memory. So you've got these machines that very quickly can be provisioned. Like John said, it can be as little as 3 seconds on really good storage, maybe realistically more 3 to 10 seconds, but a very quickly provisioned, machine joined, booted, and ready to log into VM. So I'm going to cancel out at this point. If you were following along, also cancel out. In production, you just click through next and finish. We're not going to do that in the lab here. And then after the pool's created, the final thing you'd need to do, which we cover in the manual, is to entitle that. So an entitlement is just really who's allowed to use it. So just for completeness, let's go through that. We'll select our existing instant clone pool here. Go to entitlements, add an entitlement, really just like any permission you give, right? Plugs into Active Directory. I think we use user1, mod1 for this. And again, in production, you would obviously do this with AD groups, not with individual users. But just as an example, we'll add that one. And then if we review the kind of settings of the pool, we would see everything we just talked about for the pool itself. It's an automated pool. It's a floating assignment. It's based off instant clones. And then under entitlements, we'll see domain users, which we'd already entitled, and our new user there. So I'll pause there because I went quite quickly through a fair bit of content. Any questions at that point, or makes sense? Yes? Okay. Question in the back.
So I wanted to know if at some point you want to cut the snapshot pile you're making by doing a clone and starting fresh, or it doesn't matter, you can just pile up snapshot on your golden image?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's a balance, because it is useful to have those available for roll up and roll back. I would say in general in production, I see people keep 2, possibly 3 snapshots alive, and then do a good job. It's a great point, because in general, right, if you do a vSphere health check, what always gets flagged? Too many snapshots. Horizon is really the one exception to that, where we have to use snapshots and encourage that use. So I would say keeping 2 to 3 in the cycle is good. But to your question of whether you need to go back to a complete fresh start, I wouldn't say it's absolutely necessary, but like any maintenance of an operating system, a clean rebuild can often fix issues if you're seeing those. I wouldn't say it's required unless you're seeing some kind of problem. I don't know if you'd want to add to that, John, on the kind of snapshot length, or whether you would at some point choose to rebuild.
As far as the number of snapshots in the chain?
Yeah, I covered the number in the chain, more just about like a total from scratch rebuild. I mean, one thing I would say, and where I see customers do it most often, is on a change from obviously 10 to 11, you can do an in-place upgrade, but just makes sense maybe to start fresh at that point. Mm-hmm. Or if you've had your Win 10 image for 2 years, maybe it's time just to start over. But for the most part, from what I've seen with customers anyway, it's not an issue to continue that same, right. I guess, starting point through lots of iterations while just managing those snapshots so you don't end up with a huge chain.
Yeah, the biggest thing there is you don't want to end up with a ton of snapshots. It just causes some performance issues down the road. So just keep the snapshots to a minimum. If you want to start out, if you're going from Windows 10 to Windows 11, like Nathan said, that is probably a good time to do a new image rather than an upgrade. So that's the main thing.
The other thing I'll just add as a side note, when we're talking about that parent machine for the pool itself, at that point we kind of sever the link, and this is getting a little deeper, maybe we can chat some more afterwards. We sever the link between the base and the pool, and we essentially collapse what's in the base and create a parent for the pool from that. So at that point, while the genesis of that pool was the base, we're not relying on it. Not that you would do this, you could actually delete the base and it's still going to run because we created a copy essentially. So if you're interested in digging into that more, we can chat afterwards for sure. It's kind of interesting, I think, how that process works. Yeah, well, I think that probably covers off everything on instant clones. So maybe we'll switch to app volumes and pull the PowerPoint back up.
Let's bring that up.
Yeah.
All right.
I've got a gentleman who's got questions. I need to run the mic to him.
Yeah, sure.
I just had one question about snapshots. Sorry. We've noticed recently a lot of our snapshots that are maybe a week old with minimal changes have been ballooning out to 120 gigs or so. Is there anything to clean some of that up or something we could look at?
That's probably one to take offline afterwards. Like, let's have a chat. I don't have any immediate issues, but we have a few other people here who manage Horizon. 120 gigs is enormous. Yeah.
All right, so app volumes. Like I mentioned earlier, the idea is with app volumes is you're going to be able to package your applications in what we call packages, and we use the app volumes agent there that's plugged into the OS through a mini filter driver to virtualize the registry and the file system behind that. So these packages are read-only, so they can't be modified by the end user. So you can basically use that to plug in these different apps into a live operating system without doing a full install. So an application, of course, contains one or more packages. It's used for an assignment purpose. So, for instance, if you have Adobe Acrobat and you want to assign that application to those users, you create a package for it and assign that application to the end users. And then we have the concept of, like I said, packages themselves. That's what is created as a VMDK or a VHD, because app volumes can be used in both a Horizon on-prem environment and in Azure. So that's why we support VHD. And then we have the concept of the program, which is the executables, and then we have markers that you can use to kind of have different versions out there of the different applications, so you can actually do an upgrade, and you can say, okay, all users are assigned the current package, but say I have this tested development package I'm working on, you can have a different marker for that one and assign specific users to that different application. So now we're going to kind of step through all that in the manual here. And we're going to go to app volumes, and we're going to actually do some packaging here.
Yeah, and if you want to follow along, this would be the time to like really get hands-on with the lab. Yep. So I would suggest if you want to do that, jump into it within the manual. There's a table of contents here you can click, and we're working on module 5.
Yep. So we're going to learn about packaging here and assignments. I'm not going to go through kind of what app volumes is, but the idea is that it's kind of optimize your package management. Okay, so in this step, we're going to go ahead. I guess I can do this with a mic in my hands. We're going to go ahead and launch Firefox, which we already did. And we're going to log into the App Volumes Manager, and you see under Region A, we have an App Volumes Manager A. And then we have Administrator. I don't need to type it. I can copy it. So one trick in these hands-on labs, if you actually highlight the text, this is really good if you do a command line-based lab. You just highlight the text, you'll see that little hand show up, and it'll actually put the administrator account in there, and it'll copy over the password for me too. So it makes things a little bit easier, especially when going from the manual. VMware 1-bang is the password. So after we get into the App Volumes Manager, we're going to go ahead and create a new application, which is right here. And we're going to give it a name. In this case, we're going to be packaging 7-zip. Go ahead and type that one for me. And we're going to click Create. Create application 7-zip, yes. So what this is going to do now is it's going to go out there and spin up a packaging VM after we give it a little bit more details. Go ahead.
You want to drag or I can?
Yeah, it won't drag for that one. So we're going to package 7-zip 2201. And note right now the delivery type is classic. We'll get into what on-demand does later. And our stage is new. Stage is kind of cool because what you can do is you can say, okay, this is a new package. I haven't really done any testing on it. I can then mark it as tested down the road if I've got my application testers that have run through it. And then I've got the published state and then kind of a retired state. It just gives you a little bit of life cycle management. Go ahead and create that. Next. And go ahead and click Create. And we're going to perform that in the background. Okay, so now if we click on Inventory, we can see that there is a 7-zip package there, but there's probably not much in there other than the metadata. And there's the packages, okay. Oh, there's a 7-zip, yeah. Yeah, that's just showing the metadata. And this is where we're going to actually package it. If you click the package button, we're going to find the packaging computer. And package, okay. And we're going to start packaging. I must have skipped a step there. Okay, so next we're going to go back to vCenter, and we're going to find that we're logged into the web client. If you haven't logged in already, the credentials are on the lab manual on step 200. And go ahead and get logged into vCenter. And we're going to find Win10-2A, which is right there. And we're going to launch the web console to that VM. Going to go ahead and log in. Click other user. Come on, mouse. There it goes. I'm going to log in there with user1 mod1, and the password is always going to be VMware 1-bang. Well, we get logged in. Now, what you should see here is once this is finishing logging in, you'll see app volumes pop up and show that it's ready to kind of start accepting the package. And you see it's in packaging mode here.
And just to add there, really what we've got here is just a super clean Windows 10 machine. You want to ideally match this up to your base, because part of this packaging process, like a lot of packaging tools, is kind of a before get the changes, and then finish. So obviously if there's discrepancies between your base machine and your packaging machine, what you pick up in that package might not really be what you need to run it, because there might be, say, missing components. So try and keep those as similar as possible. But this Win1002A machine is really just a very simple Win10 box.
Yep. And you don't want to click OK on the package until you actually are done installing the package. So we're going to go to File Explorer and what's that? And under Documents or Downloads, Documents, yeah. Under HOL, and you see I've got a WinZip or a 7-zip installer here. We're going to go ahead and do the install for that.
If you see that smart screen pop up that John just saw, just go ahead and click Run. For whatever reason, in the lab, we've disabled that, but it somehow keeps finding its way back.
So 7-zip's pretty small, so it went ahead. The install's done now. I'm going to go ahead and close it. And then we're done with the packaging process, so we're going to do OK. And yes, the installation is complete. This is just a place where you can kind of put some notes in on, what's going on with that package, if it's maybe an upgrade or something like that. You can put those details in there. And we're going to finalize.
And the versioning you can add there too. I don't think we're going to have time to cover versioning. We can maybe come back to it if we have time. But there's a way to mark these current and use different lifecycle tags like John was mentioning. With this, we're just going to mark it as current and use it. But the versioning becomes useful, obviously, in that process.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and do a restart on this VM to get the packaging process to complete. Fortunately, it's a VM, so it shouldn't take too long here. Should have done it while you're doing your little spill there.
While we're waiting for that to reboot, any questions so far? Oh, you want to?
So I'm curious if this is like a layering, really that's just on top of the operating system. And one of the things that we would have a use for, and what we've looked at other layering technologies, we have Citrix in our organization, as well as like AVD, and we've used tried MSIX and app layering in Citrix and whatnot. But we would be very interested in trying to use multiple versions of a same application inside of an image, if possible. And I don't know if this is something that has the ability to do things like that.
Okay. So there's lots of parts to that question. So the first part is whether it's an application layering. I would say yes in the loosest sense. The way that this is actually working underneath is this package that we're creating. When we say create package, is creating a VMDK, virtual disk, and then as we've just gone through this process, the bits for, in this case, 7-zip, have gone into that. We then make that VMDK read-only, so we can attach it one-to-many. And the app volumes agent that we showed in that diagram is what meshes in those changes, much like you do with snapshots, right? You can be on a server with many snapshots. Inside the guest, you're unaware of that, like we're merging everything. App volumes agent takes it a step further by also merging registry changes and things like that. That's how we get the application installed into the desktop or RDSH server. So it's layering in that sense. It's not layering in the sense that maybe some other products do it.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a layer so much as a merge, because we're doing registry virtualization and file virtualization to bring those live into the OS. And so it's not really a layer. It's more of
an attachment.
An attachment, and it's more like it's natively installed.
Yeah, and for the most part, like if you were looking inside the guest OS, you can eventually figure out that it's not natively installed, but certainly to an end user, it appears natively installed. To an admin on their first pass, they would think it's natively installed. If you dig deep enough, you can figure it out. And then the second part of your question was more around, I think, isolation of applications between each other. That's really, we have a product called ThinApp, which we don't have in this lab, but that's more around the isolation piece.
Yeah,
so that's virtualizing file and registry, so you can have either complete isolation or some isolation between apps and operating system and control that piece. You can use the two in conjunction, so we could definitely chat some more about how you might do that. And then the last part I heard was that you have a Citrix environment. App Volumes is its own product. It doesn't rely on Horizon. So you can run the App Volumes agent on a physical RDS, Citrix box, whatever. It's its own tool. So yes, you can mix and match really. And I think we probably could get to where you're looking to be. So yeah, if you want to chat some more afterwards, we can do that.
All right, so we just went through the reboot process, and so we got packaging successful. So now we've got an application package that we can work with here. So we're going to pop back over to the App Volumes Manager. And we are already logged in, so we don't have to log in again. We're back to inventory and applications, packages. And then we're going to look at that 7-zip package again. And you see now we've got this option to set current, and that's going to basically say, okay, this is the current version of this application that I want to have pushed out. Click on applications, and this is where we're going to assign that application. And click assign. And we're going to assign it to domain users.
And this is where that distinction between an application and a package comes in. So you would have one application for 7-zip, but as you package different versions, you obviously have multiple packages. And then when you're assigning those, that's where the markers come in. So here it's pretty simple. We're just assigning the current to everybody. But if you had, say, test groups, you could assign the test tagged version, test marker version, to a group ahead of time while leaving everyone else on current before you go all out and roll that out to the whole environment.
Assign by marker.
You need a checkbox there.
That one, okay. And assign, okay. So now, if you have an App Volumes agent on a virtual desktop and you're a domain user, we will basically on log on deliver that application to the end user. That just confirms assignment. And then so we're going to see what that looks like. We're going to log into the Horizon client next. There it goes. And you'll see the horizon01corp.vmbeans.com is the connection server we're going to connect to. We're going to make sure you change the username to, shouldn't matter, but in this lab we're going to use user1 module 5. And we're going to do VMware 1 bang and log in. We're going to jump on that instant clone pool. And again, this is a classic assignment, so it's assigning these applications at logon. And the next step will show you the on-demand assignment. And if you click here, you can see that we have 7-zip available to us, and it looks to us like it's fully installed. Even if I go into add remove programs, let me do this. Oh, okay. Wrong VM. It's still logging in, sorry. Where is it?
I'll just add while this is taking a moment. Part of this, or really all of this, comes from that nested, like we're in one of 8 different clouds right now, and we all might be in different clouds. we have virtual ESXi hosts running in that, and then we're in what we call layer 2. So everything we're doing here is nested on top of that set of vSphere hosts. So something like a login obviously wouldn't normally take that long, nor would the app attachment.
Yeah, if your login's taking, anything, I generally can shoot for about a 40-second login or less. That's what I would consider a good login. So if you're over that, then there's probably some optimization you can do to get that to a better spot. I've seen as good in the field as low as 20 seconds, but that particular hospital system took a little time to get there. But they were using app volumes to do it, so.
Yeah, I'll add there too. We used to attach the packages in a much more linear fashion, and that essentially meant for every one that you added, you would increase the login time. It was small, but if you're putting 15 packages down, you might be adding, say, 15 seconds to a login, which is obviously not good, right? That's slow. So with the current version of app volumes, and I think it began in about 4, they started doing concurrent attaches, which really means that it doesn't matter as much how many. We used to say an absolute maximum of 25 app volumes applications that could be attached because of that kind of sequential loading. Now it's done concurrently. It doesn't make too much difference how you break up those applications and how many you attach.
You can see 7 zip managers installed there. And then if I do look at add remove programs, and it looks like a natively installed application from the OS perspective. You can basically, it's treated just like it was regularly installed.
Yeah, and if you browse into C program files, it's there. If you open up regedit, we're not going to do that now, and browse to the right keys, they'll be there too. You have to dig pretty deep before you figure out that it's not really there.
Yeah, so this is what the end user would see, and then from an admin perspective, we're going to go back to the App Volumes Manager. Click on inventory attachments. Yep, there it is. And you can see that these computers have attachments to 7-zip. So this is how, if you were an admin, you could come in here and see which computers were using that package. So, all right. So with that, we're going to skip down to Apps on Demand and see how that kind of works differently. I'm going to skip to Module 7. So the idea here with Apps on Demand is if you had, for instance, an RDSH farm, the idea is that you can have a generic kind of RDSH farm. Now, if you're a hospital system, I'm not talking about Epic. So if Epic is its own beast in many different ways, so that's probably not a good candidate. But all the ancillary apps around Epic, it's probably okay to do this. The idea here is you're going to have an RDSH farm out there that is as generic as possible, and then you're going to use Apps on Demand to deploy these apps onto the users as they log in. So you don't have to worry about having 15 different types of RDSH farms to support all the different apps. So let's kind of see what that looks like. So we're going to log into Horizon, which we probably already have one still here. And I closed it, okay, that's fine. Get rid of this one. And I'm just going to do this. Let's go to Firefox. And we're going to log into the Horizon admin console. No, I'm not going to copy. All right, we're going to log in there with administrator. I'm going to use my fancy copy and paste here. Password is VMware 1-Bang, as it is should be for all other labs unless it's got a unique security requirement. Then it's probably VMware 1-Bang, VMware 1-Bang.
Correct.
And then we're in the Horizon admin console. And what we're going to do here, which is different, if you're an existing Horizon customer, we didn't used to have this direct integration between App Volumes and Horizon. App Volumes was kind of did its thing on its own. Horizon didn't have a lot of knowledge of it, so now it does. So let's take a look at settings, and then servers. And you see there's a new tab here. If you've never seen this before, it won't be new, but if you are, you have this new App Volume Managers tab. We're going to add it. And then we're going to put in some details, like the App Volume Manager server name. That copy didn't go good here. Try it again. And then we're going to use our Corp Administrator username. And then VMware 1Bang is our password. We get stuck. What's going on here? Okay, there it went that time. So now I've got an App Volume Manager registered into Horizon. We're going to go back up to Inventory, and we're going to click on Farms. And you see we've got an RDSH host out there. We're going to select that RDSH host, hit More Commands, and we're going to associate the App Volume Manager into that farm. Go ahead and select it, and hit OK. So now we're going to just pop over to the App Volumes Manager again. Log in there with Administrator if you're not already. And select on Inventory. We already got Inventory. We're going to go to Packages, and you see I've got FileZilla already out there. We're going to expand it. And this is where we're going to get into, oops, click Edit. We're going to change this from Classic Assignment, which is assigning the package when the user logs in, to On Demand. And we're going to save that setting. So now this package is available on demand. So let's return to the Horizon admin interface for a second. Under Inventory, Applications, you notice that FileZilla is not there. We're going to add an application, add from App Volumes Manager.
And those other application types, they're generally RDSH is what you'd publish through those. We can also publish applications off a Windows desktop OS. You know, when you've got those apps that won't run nicely in RDSH, you can still spin up an instant clone pool of Windows desktops, but rather than presenting the whole desktop, you can pull just the apps out of there. So that's kind of what John is showing here, is the difference with doing it directly from App Volumes Manager.
Yep. So make sure you don't select FileZilla. Make sure you select FileZilla Client. Do Next, and then Submit. And then it's adding. And then this is where we're gonna actually do the entitlement to the package. So we're gonna add user 1 module 6. Thank you. Find him. I'm gonna check that, click OK.
And the other thing to point out here is that in that last module, we were assigning applications through the App Volumes Manager. When we're doing on demand, because it's Horizon that's controlling those RDSH sessions, it's also Horizon that's managing the assignment. Even though it's an App Volumes assignment, it's getting managed through the Horizon admin.
Yeah, so you're doing it all here in the Horizon interface this time. So now I'm assigning that package to that user and confirming. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to launch the Horizon client. close that one. I'm going to start with a fresh client. And we're going to hit that same connection server, horizon01.corp.vmbeans.com. Make sure we change the username to the user that we assigned, because it does have module 5 there from the last pass. Log in. And we're going to launch the FileZilla client. Now remember, this is an RDSH, so we had all the applications that were available there, but this app is now being attached to that RDSH host, and so we can use it as if it was actually installed. But that RDSH host was already up and running, and we're going to take a look at the attachment here in a second. Everything's just a little bit slower in hands-on labs sometimes. Okay, so there you see we've got FileZilla up and running as an RDSH app. So now we're going to go back to the App Volumes Manager. And let's look at the attachments. FileZilla. Packages. Oh, attachments. I always lose that one. And then we see that FileZilla is attached to the RDSH machine. So that's it for a quick overview of app volumes. Any questions on that one? Okay. If not, we'll move on to DEM. Or DEM.
DEM.
DEM. DEM is a different product.
I have a headset. Thank you. All right, so we'll pick up the pace a little bit because it's getting late in the afternoon, and we want to get you out of here so you can grab a beer. So let me just clean up this a little bit, and then we'll jump into DEM. So DEM, or Dynamic Environment Manager, as I mentioned, is like the final layer. So we've done the instant clone OSs. We've done applications through app volumes. Now we're going to put in a little bit of user personalization. One of the interesting things about DEM is that it's a really lightweight tool. There is no server per se. There's really just an agent and some file shares where the configuration is stored, and then a share, obviously, to keep the user's personalization. There are some other tools surrounding it, including a self-service tool. So if someone knows something worked yesterday, but it stopped working today and you feel like it's a profile issue, you can enable the user to self-service that. Hands up, how many people like to give their users that choice? Not many. So there's the same tool for help desk. And then there's also the application profiler tool. I don't think we're going to have time to go through that today, but I will explain what it's for. Which is to essentially, with DEM rather, one of the interesting things is out of the box, we're not capturing any user data at all. Unlike a lot of profile type solutions where you get those very big bloated profiles because you're getting everything, the temp files, the caches, and everything else. With DEM, we don't get anything out of the box. We have an option called Easy Start, which I'll point out in the lab, which kind of hits your common apps, right? Office, Adobe, some of the zip tools, things like that. So we're starting to capture a little bit of information. But from that point forward, it's up to you to decide exactly what your end user is going to care about and then capture just those settings that matter. So even within an application, for Chrome, you want to capture obviously their bookmarks and some of their preferences, but that's probably all you need. And it's a really small amount of data you need from the registry and the file system to be able to give that impression to the end user that it's their desktop and it has some level of persistence to it. But on the back end, that means we can capture, maybe megs worth of data instead of like hundreds of megs or sometimes going into gigs, right? For anyone who's managed Windows for a while, you've all seen the multi-gig terror profiles. So that's the idea behind DEM. So we'll take a quick look at what that looks like here. So if you're going to follow along in the lab, we're jumping around a bit. We're going to module 4. And we can jump straight into this personalization. Actually, let's go one back just to talk about Easy Start. So Easy Start is just built into the product. We have a set of templates. Easy Start is a selection of those. So when you click that, it pre-populates Office, some drive mapping options, Adobe, things like that. So at least you're not starting from total scratch. We also have a catalog of templates that you can import for commonly known apps. And then if you know your app really well and you know like it needs these registry keys and this is the ini file that matters, you can just manually like paste that in there, save some time. If you don't, or you want to confirm the application profiler is how you determine what it is you need to capture. That is in the lab, so if you want to take that at a separate time, feel free. But I don't think we'll quite have time to get to that today. So let's take a look at the console. This is where you're going to manage this. So like I said, there's not really any server for this per se. We have a management console, and then we have a couple of file shares, which I'll point out here. Obviously, you put these in a production environment on a real file server. We're using the console machine. So there's DEM prod. This is where all of the configuration is, and it's really just a set of XML files that defines what it is we're going to capture. And you can see those in here. This is what gets pushed to the agent as its configuration. And then the only other share you need is for the user data itself.
This is another product that kind of can be sold standalone as well. And we do have some customers that are using Citrix and using this for the app personalization piece too. Just so you know.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, John. So we're just going to use WordPad for a quick example here. We're really just coming in here to point out what DirectFlex is, which is, again, you have control over when this runs. So you can obviously bring in everything for a profile as the user logs in, but often users are logging in and not using all of their apps, so you don't actually need to load all of the profile. So DirectFlex allows you to bring in those settings for an application at application launch time. So that's what we'll take a look at here with WordPad.
And the reason why that's important is you don't want all those settings coming down at logon because it'll increase your logon time. So DirectFlex enables it to pull those application settings down at application launch, and that way the users are not going to notice that lag. So that's the main reason why we have DirectFlex. I've had come into some customer environments where they don't know about DirectFlex and they're complaining their logon times are bad. We go into there's a DEM log file on it for each user in that share, and you can actually see that it's loading in all those settings, and that's what's causing their logon times to be long.
So we're just going to use WordPad as an example. We're going to log in, just make some really basic changes. We'll capture those and then just take a quick look at the fact that it is captured and where it's stored. And then we'll move on to actually setting some options for the end user. So I'm just going to go into WordPad, change some of my view preferences. We'll turn off the ruler, change it to metric, close that out, and then we'll just log off from this session. And then if we take a look at that user now, we should see there's a new folder being created. Real simple, just logs, so you can see exactly what goes on. The login's really good actually, especially when you're troubleshooting, trying to figure out perhaps why something doesn't look the way it should for someone. Really easy to read, almost plain English logs can be very helpful. And then the archives is where we're actually making these setting changes. They're all stored in zips, which you can open, but shouldn't edit. You should always edit through the dem tool.
Yeah, it's not a standard zip file, so you'd have to have more of a command line zip, I think, to unpack it.
Correct. I think, yeah, 7-zip would too. The real point is that you should always
Stay away
use the
from
tool. So then, when we want to actually capture the settings that's already done for us, you can also pre-populate settings at boot time of the app. It could be settings for the app, or in this case, we're going to show some environmental changes. So if you have an application that needs a particular drive mapping, again, to John's point, there's no point in wasting time during the logon mapping that drive if they're not going to use the application that needs it. So you may as well wait until they're using the app to launch the drive mapping. So we're going to go into the user environment tab here, and we're going to add that drive mapping. We'll just give it a simple name. Select a drive letter, and then we'll drag in the path. Thanks for the reminder. Give it a friendly name, which is just what's going to be shown in Windows Explorer, and this one we'll set to unmap it after the app exits. And we'll save the config file. I'm going to launch up that same desktop pool again. Maybe we should ask for yet more resources.
Very busy clouds today.
This lab is actually one of the largest. The lab captains would prefer it was a little smaller. So I don't think we're getting any extra space. I think that's still booting.
Yeah, it takes a second.
That was the impatient user click, open it 4 times. So if we take a look, no map drives here, but when we launch WordPad, what we should see, if I did that right, is that the drive mapping takes place just at launch there. And we're using a drive mapping as an example because it's obviously very easy to see. It could be printers, it could be environment variables, it could be a script that you need to run. It doesn't have to be a launch trigger, it could be a log on, log off trigger. I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Connect and disconnect.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Just even disconnecting and reconnecting. Healthcare is another good example, right? Where disconnect and reconnect. You have doctors who tap in and tap out with the improviser cards. If anyone works in healthcare, you know, they're moving station to station pretty frequently. So often you need to change things like printer mappings just because they've tapped in and out. It hasn't run another login script. They haven't started a new session. You just need it to occur because they've moved. So there's a lot of flexibility in that. There's a lot of flexibility in the rules as well. Around, you know, you can do it for, you can set those up so that it only runs if it belongs to a certain AD group, if they're on a particular machine type, a particular machine name, if they're coming from a particular set of client IP addresses. The list is pretty long, but you can get really granular and manipulate those profiles, as it were, as much as you need to. So I think that's kind of our stopping point there. You see, obviously, when we finish, it disconnects those sessions. Before we wrap up, were there any other questions around either DEM or any of the other pieces we've covered? Or is it beer time? There's a question.
We're getting pretty close to hall crawl time, I think.
I'm originally English, by the way. That's why I probably
Require
mentioned
a
beer
license for
frequently.
it?
Yeah, well, it does require a license from a paper perspective, but there's no license key that you'd have to install.
I'll just install it.
Yes, it's just the agent that gets installed. Yep. Any more questions?
Okay, so then the last couple of things is just one quick ask. When you close out your lab, there'll be a survey. If you could take the 15 seconds it takes just to give a couple of star ratings, any comments you'd have, we really appreciate that because it helps us improve these labs, helps us improve the presentation, everything else. And then just a couple of things to point out if you're looking for more info. Blogs is kind of interesting to see what's new. The one I really want to bring your attention to though is techzone.vmware.com. So most of you are probably familiar with docs.vmware.com. It's a little dry. It's got every possible option in there, but it doesn't always run you through the A to Z of like, if I need to do this task, how do I do that? TechZone is designed to address that, and it has a lot more how-tos, you know, from getting started to some pretty in-depth topics around all of our EUC products. So if you keep that in mind, it's a great resource. But with that, unless anyone else had any other questions, we are around afterwards if you want to dig in particularly on some of those very environment-specific questions. I know there was one around huge instant clones and the Citrix environments. Feel free to come up and have a chat. Otherwise, thanks very much.